Well, it's a great afternoon, and good afternoon to all our visitors to the radio station, because right now in Studio 2 we have Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. I'm your host, Tony Graham. Good afternoon, Matthew.
Good afternoon, Tony. Thanks for chatting with me about technology again.
Yes, and look, when it comes down to technology, there's nothing better for entertainment, I reckon, and keeping up with it. It's really important. People really appreciate it.
It's certainly a fast-changing industry, or everything to do with technology seems to be very fast-changing, Tony. So it's great to have two sessions a week to get to tell your listeners about technology changes.
Well, we have to understand our world. And now the first topic we've got here this afternoon is to do with the safety of drinking water. And this is a bit of a problem. It's always looked at from a military point of view, from a war point of view even, but it goes beyond that. So when you have a drink of water from a tap, should we be too concerned about hackers? Good question.
Well, I must admit, Tony, it's not the first thing that comes to my mind. When I turn on the tap and have a drink, I'm not going, gee, I wonder if there's any hackers around at the moment. But maybe we should be a little bit worried about that, because hackers have just broken into a water treatment facility in the town of Oldsmar over in Florida, and they've attempted to poison the water supply. Now, again, from a military perspective that you mentioned, Tony, if you wanted to attack a population, what a perfect way to do it. If you attack the water supply, presumably everyone in that town is drinking from that water supply, so you're going to have a fairly good way of suppressing the masses pretty quickly. But it's a really simple process that they use to gain access to this particular water supply. When I was reading this story, I was imagining some really complicated processes, some ways that they might have tried to break into the automation on that water supply. But they use something called TeamViewer, which is something that many people across the world use on a semi-regular basis when they want someone else to take control of their computer. They might be getting some remote tech support, for example. They put TeamViewer on their computer, the other person has TeamViewer, and they can take control of the computer and use it as if they were sitting there in front of it. And it was either good luck or an employee doing their job correctly, but there was an employee sitting at their desk and they suddenly saw that a window popped up to tell him that the computer was being accessed. And the next thing you know, there's a mouse that's being moved around with no hands from him, and it's opening programs and changing things on the system. And what they ended up doing was they dramatically increased the amount of sodium hydroxide that was being put into the water supply. Now, most water filtration plants have got this sitting there and used in small amounts, and it just controls the acidity of the water. But if you put dramatically higher levels in, then it can be quite dangerous, even to the point where it can cause death. But even in the lower doses, it can cause burns, irritation, some other complications if you start ingesting it. Again, lucky the employer was watching, notified his employer, they shut down the plant, made the rectification, did the testing, and then no unsafe water was sent out from the facility. But imagine if that particular employee just happened to, go to the toilet at that time, go over and talk to one of his colleagues, go and get a cup of coffee. Next thing you know, the entire town water supply would have been poisoned. So it's something that you've got to be aware of no matter what you do and what, I suppose, processes you're involved with. Hackers are out there trying to do things all the time.
Yes, the old poison the well trick that has been around for a long time. And the next question is whether or not Facebook has actually poisoned their own well, because everybody knows that Facebook wants to try and dominate the technology space. And they've tried a new thing now, but the response from consumers has been somewhat underwhelming, hasn't it?
Underwhelming puts it very mildly, Tony. Facebook has been rumoured to want to bring out a watch. And obviously you've got Apple watches very popular, you've got Samsung watches, you've got Fitbit watches. So there's a whole range of fitness and smart watches out there. And so Facebook's decided that they might want to bring out something in that line as well. They've only just started dabbling in some hardware, Facebook, but this is something that they see as a good market, a market they could get into. But once the rumours started going around about it, the response from consumers has been fairly damning. Many people have obviously alluded to the fact that Facebook maybe isn't the best at using your data appropriately. maybe marketing a little bit too much. I mean, people were talking about the fact that how bad would it be wearing your watch and seeing ads pop up on your watch, how frustrating it would be that you're trying to use your watch, and if you went for a run and you weren't as fast as you used to be, you'd have ads popping up for new shoes or maybe a medical appointment. So I'm not sure that the consumers out there are ready to accept this. In fact, the consumers have been pretty quick to really stick it into Facebook because of their past history. So if they wanted to test the water with a rumour, which some companies do from time to time, then given the response so far, they may not go ahead with this particular rumoured device.
Yeah, that's very instructive about the market, I have to say. Now, every week we get new news about the electronic cars and all their future plans for rollouts from the manufacturers. It's a fast-moving space. Now, which is the latest brand to make an announcement about this?
Yeah, Jaguar is the latest brand, actually, and Jaguar have had one electric car, the I-Pace, and I've driven that. It's quite a nice electric vehicle. They've taken a good step into that EV space, but they've now made the announcement that Jaguar will only build electric cars by 2025, not that far down the track. Now, when you think that in the UK, for example, anything not powered or anything powered by petrol or diesel will be banned from the year 2030 onwards, they've still got more time up their sleeve if they wanted to go past 2025, but they've obviously seen that this is the future. So from 2025, the only Jaguar you'll be able to buy will be EV. Now, they've also got their Land Rover division. So, of course, Jaguar was bought out by Tata, and their Land Rover division will not be all electric by 2025, but certainly moving that way. They'll have some electric vehicles by 2024, and they'll be more aiming with their Land Rover brand to be probably 60% of their vehicles by the year 2030. So they'll be well on the way with Land Rover. With Jaguar, again, their first one, the sales haven't been fantastic of the I-Pace, but again, it's their first step into that EV space, and they'll learn from that. They'll see what consumers think of that, and then from there, I think they'll start to bring out more models. And everyone now is seeing that this is the future, and they're now starting that race to be the brand that's known for that particular model or that particular type of vehicle. Obviously, Tesla's done a fantastic job across the world in being seen as an EV manufacturer, but more traditional manufacturers like Jaguar are really trying to position themselves as the future at the moment. So it's a pretty exciting space. Exciting time for anyone that loves their vehicles because so many different models will be coming out. I think I've talked about it before, Tony. There's about 24 new EV models that we should see in Australia this year. Some of those from traditional manufacturers, some from new manufacturers. But it's obviously going that way very quickly. And around the world, when you look at some of those targets, Australia, let's not mention Australia, they're so far behind the times that it's a bit of a joke. But Norway, for example, is banning all non-EV sales, so that's not quite correct, sorry, they could do hydrogen. So they're banning all gasoline-powered sales by 2025. California, 2035, France, 2040, and as I mentioned before, the UK, 2030. So a lot of countries around the world are getting to that point where they'll ban them. And it's interesting with California, obviously not being a country, being a state, that they're not worried about the laggard US government. That might change with the new president there, of course, but they've taken matters into their own hands. So even in Australia, where the Australian government isn't really taking much action, it'd be great to see one or more states come out and be the leaders and actually force the Australian government into some sort of position on EVs.
Yes, and I should mention that Tata, the manufacturer of Jaguar, is a fast-moving, fast-paced Indian manufacturer, and they are doing lots of other kinds of EVs over there, which is more suited to their market as well. And you've been listening to Tech Talk on Binjang 91.5 with Matthew Dickerson. And now it's back to all the great information and music and programs and news and you name it on Binjang 91.5.
Thanks, Tony. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Matthew.